Howdy, everyone. This is Jeff Megow again with the tenantimprovement.com podcast, the Lease and Build Podcast. I want to thank you guys for joining us for another episode. I am joined today here by a good friend, Griff Bandy, who's one of the experts profiled on our site in commercial leasing with Partners Real Estate. Griff, I want to just say thank you for
Thanks, Jeff.
joining us. We had one of your associates, Charlie, on recently, and kind of gave us the overview of leasing, but you and I started talking about some other more specific. So in terms of like renegotiating existing lease midterm. So I look forward to getting into that with you.
Great.
But before we do that, let's just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from,
Sure.
how you long real estate, that kind of background.
You bet. Thanks, Jeff. So born and raised here in Houston, had a number of jobs in my 20s, which probably helped me realize what I like and don't like. And the attraction to commercial real estate, specifically office tenant rep, was it's a big, broad playing field. You can move the needle on kind of your income and your upside as much as you want to work. And have 4 kids and a wife that likes nice things. So I have a lot of motivation to get out there and hustle. But seriously, it's a great industry. You get to see a lot of businesses. It's interesting. Every day is different, can be different. So that keeps it, unique and doesn't get stale.
Okay. And so Partners in Real Estate, you've been with them, or how did you join them? How long?
Yeah.
What is your role?
21 years and counting. So
Okay.
got into it in my early 30s. So the key, what I was told getting into the business is you want to get in with a company that's going to support you and train you. Definitely want to get into an opportunity where there's a mentor that has an open door policy, meaning he'll help you. He or she will help you, sell with you, coach you through the process. So I got that at Partners at the time. It was NAI, just a national affiliate. We dropped that. We became independent 3 years ago, and it's been great.
Nice. All right. Excellent. And so we started the conversation a few days ago where we were saying, hey, let's get on this podcast together and renegotiating midterm leases.
Right.
We have a lot of growing listeners that we're trying to provide information and support for in terms of as they're thinking about approaching the end of their lease. What does that look like? So mid-lease, what are some signs that one, they need to start looking, and then what are some options that you want to explore?
So, I would say this concept really took off, post-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there was definitely lease restructuring and reworking before that, because companies changed their number of headcount in the office or their needs or their layout or their area of town they want to be in. But it really got supercharged during and after COVID because this, work from home program kind of went bananas. Companies realized, hey, I've got twice as much space as I do headcount. What can I do with this? And then the other side of that is you had landlords motivated, interested in retaining tenants and doing whatever it took to keep them. So you have a little bit of a business shift on how people were in office space before and then after COVID, coupled with landlords, realizing, hey, maybe I need to do something before this tenant just walks out.
Yeah, that's interesting. COVID is such a what I sometimes struggle to remember, and that I'm reminded of is it wasn't a single moment. It was several year single moment, right?
That's right.
Of how things changed. And in our business, as the viewers know, that I have a commercial floor covering business in Houston, and it used to be in the first quarter of the year, I kind of knew where the year was going to end up just because of how repetitive business was. And then the great reshuffle of the pandemic came. But during the pandemic, a lot of people were downsizing. So maybe this restructuring kind of came of that. So if somebody has to give back unneeded space, or if they have unused space, what are some of those options, or that what do they look? How do they approach?
How do you get started?
How do you get started? Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, a lot of tenants and companies don't realize this is even available to them. So let's just start there. So it takes finding the right companies at the right time willing to think and talk about it. And, it's not a especially attractive or sexy topic. They're out there trying to drive revenue. This is a cost saving measure, but there's significant savings to be had by restructuring a lease, restructuring the footprint that they keep. And so what you do for a company that's willing and interested, saying, I'm using the space differently and I want to adjust my costs, there's absolutely things to do. First, we want to do is take a look at their sublease provision.
Okay.
Every commercial office lease, for the most part, is going to have that. That's a very standard concept in all office leases. And they're usually pretty friendly, meaning tenant, go find a subtenant. Landlord's going to embrace that. And there's some nuances to approvals, but that's very doable. So you have that part. Secondly, you work with an architect and a general contractor potentially and say, if we could reset our layout, maybe we don't need a full floor. Maybe we need 3/4 of a floor or half of a floor, 20,000 feet to 12,000 feet, something like that. That's a material. That's 40% cut in your usage. But it's probably a 40% cut in what your monthly rent is. So all of a sudden, that starts getting the attention of the C-suite of the companies we talk to when they know that that's potentially available. Now, I think the key is not over-promising and under-delivering in this space, too. You don't want to tell tenants this is a guaranteed, path to cutting your rent in half, because that is absolutely not the case. It takes a few components to line up.
There's probably some, you're not going to say startup costs, but cost to actually put the plan into place.
Well, definitely time.
Yeah.
You got to spend the time to sit with the architects, talk with your broker, talk with the landlord. Do you have enough term left? If you only have a couple years of term left, it's harder to do.
Yeah. Well, but so a typical lease. So this might be a conversation more for your large tenants.
I think that's right.
If I'm in a flex space, half industrial, my a 3 to 5, maybe 7-year lease, but the larger tenants that are for a full floor or more, that's where you're going to have that longer lease. So
it can be. You really have to kind of evaluate all the moving parts in the building. What's the attitude and appetite of the landlord? If they're in a fully leased building, landlord may be like, you know what? Pay what you have. I'm not too motivated to go spend time, money, energy trying to resize you. Just pay out your lease and we'll see you in 3 or 4 years when that lease expires. Others that may be at a 70 to 80% occupancy, they sure don't want to see that dip into the 60% range or even lower. And if it's a larger tenant, to your point, Jeff, that definitely has the landlord's attention and they're more inclined to engage and say, what do we need to do to keep you? And if they'll take back a little space, the tenant has to be prepared to give a little more term.
Okay.
So that's the horse trade here. Did 2 of these earlier this year. It was a win-win for the tenant. It's a win-win for the landlord because they didn't get all the space back. They got involved before the tenant starts going to market looking at all their options.
Is there standard kind of give and take in terms of, hey, I'm going to give back 20% of my space. I'm going to increase the length of the term by another 20%. Is there a mathematical?
Yeah, great question. It's a little bit of, the perceived value to the landlord. Usually it's the standard 3, 5, 7 or longer term years of term extension. And then how much term do you extend for early kind of dictates how much we can ask for in concessions. And so that's a whole nother part to this equation. So if it's a 7-year extension, usually you can get more concessions from the landlord than a 3-year extension.
Do you ever see the monthly rents reduce on a renewal if there's no TI work? Right. And I wonder that because we're now fortunate enough to be in our building that we own, but prior to, we'd sign a lease, we'd go 5 years and then we're going to renew and there's no TI,
right?
But the rent's going up. And I'm like, wait, I financed the TI the first time. Have you ever see situations like that?
Yeah. So, the TI is absolutely considered a landlord concession to the tenant, right?
Okay.
And for a short-term lease extension, there's limited to no tenant improvement allowance usually provided by the landlord. The tenant kind of just, use the term is kicking the can. They're just like, we just want to stay in our space. We're good to live in it. Give us the cheapest price point and let's just extend for 3 more years so we get better visibility to what our business does. That's not good for the construction business or the flooring business.
Right.
It's also not good for the brokerage business. but it keeps that tenant alive, in place, fight for another day. And so we saw a lot of that as well post-COVID. I think more and more companies are getting more comfortable going back to traditional 5 and 10-year lease terms.
Okay.
And on those longer-term leases, they can spend more of the landlord's money on TI.
Right. Okay. So we talked a little bit about giving back space versus subleasing. I'm sure that the landlord would much rather the tenant go and try to sublease, just so they don't have to spend the effort of doing on the give back.
Here's my suggestion on that, because Jeff, you don't know, and it's kind of silly for their broker to forecast which one's going to be more successful, because we really just don't know. Is there a subtenant around the corner that wants their space? You won't know until you put that space on the market.
Yeah.
So it hurts no one. It's more time for us, but it's beneficial to the tenant, our client. Put the space on the market for sublease, just to see what action you might kick up for either part or all of your space. That's a very reasonable strategy. One, you may find a subtenant. More importantly, I think, is it sends the message to the landlord, this tenant's really serious. It needs relief on its rent and on its layout. It wants to do something. It'd like to do something now. They understand it's obligated under the current lease. It's going to keep paying rent there per their terms. But, here's the first warning signal. We're looking to reduce our footprint and rent.
Yeah. So in my mind, a tenant who is looking to either give back space or sublease is recognizing that there's a financial disadvantage to the situation they're in. But there's that cost of maybe some adjusted TI for the new subtenant. There's the architecture fees, the broker fees, all that stuff like that.
That's right.
It's like, how do you square that up in terms of like, if I feel like I'm really in the hole, I feel like then I've got to come out with some money from our budget to make this sublease work. It's a long-term, short-term play.
So what I would tell you, great question. That's what every tenant wants to know. Like, what's the likelihood of success here? Right? And if I spend the time and energy and hire you to do this, Mr. Broker, what's the solution? And the smarter broker is going to say, we don't know until we start pulling some of these levers to see if we can attract a subtenant, or if we can get the landlord's attention to come to the table and say, here, let's work something out. With that said, before doing that work, a competent broker should be able to handicap, right, the likelihood of some different scenarios, not overpromise. Again, that's you don't want to fall into that trap. But you definitely, I can size up a building or an area of town on the likelihood of subleasing versus lease restructuring based on just being in the business 20 plus years. Because I know the landlord, I know the occupancy of the building, I know that area. Is there crime issues, parking issues, HVAC issues? Do they, is it a Class A or Class B building? I mean, there's some different components that all go into the gumbo to define, hey, what are my chances here?
Yeah. The time. So here's what's interesting. So you guys want to start talking to a tenant 18 months out, sometimes for a big tenant,
when they're
to prepare for the next lease.
Honestly, I don't want to tip my hand to other brokers, but a tenant that's a full floor or greater, the majority of the time, they do something on their lease before their lease expiration date. So if it's big enough tenant, and you're a smart enough broker, you're going to maintain a continuous relationship there.
Sure.
Because they may need more space, less space, have another deal in another city. They may have another real estate problem to deal with before that lease expires in 4 years.
Okay.
So a lot of people are like, oh, your lease is up in 4 years? Okay, I'll call you in 2 years. And yeah, that is ideal, right?
Right.
24 to 18 months, because you want to get in front of that renewal option and educate them so they know whether or not to exercise it. But the bigger ones.
But the question, not in that direction, but it's more so, it's like, so how do we tell them, if they have 18 months left, they're not looking to sublease.
Okay, yeah. If you're you're really not eligible for subleasing. Well, let me rephrase it.
So that's a good way you said it. When is
You're
it like,
not likely.
don't do it now.
You're not likely to sublease your space with less than 2 years of term remaining. So that is a fact. Now, will you see some companies do it? Yes. And who is that subtenant prospect? It's like a project need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Floor zone needs 10,000 feet to do some prep work for Exxon because you're doing flooring in Indonesia.
Yeah.
Okay. And you need a 12-month space to go get that.
Those are some oddballs.
So, you can. So when you see brokers, myself included, put space on the market with less than 2 years of term, it's a little bit of futile effort to let the landlord know, hey, come in now, work with us, restructure us a little, then you keep us. Otherwise, in 12 months, we're free agent for the whole market, and we're going to be looking. And by the way, we'll also remember you ignored us when we needed your help.
Okay, but that's when they're coming with a potential subtenant in hand, or just a subtenant need, or sublease need.
The leverage for the tenant goes up when you get inside 18 months of term left, right?
Okay.
Because if you use the right broker, you're going to go look at alternatives to staying put, and all that is negotiating leverage with anything you consider.
You got me confused now. So we said anything less than 2 years, probably not a good idea to think about subleasing. But
it's
now
just not likely.
It's not likely.
Yeah, you still might put it out there.
All right.
It's kind of like walking down the street all confident when you have no money in your pocket. I mean,
right.
Most of the world's going to go, oh, that guy looks. On the surface, you see a space downtown with 17 months of term left. Broker like me who's been doing it's like, well, they're
going to
fishing. They're fishing.
Yeah.
It's a fishing expedition.
But fishing for what? For somebody who might just come in and grab the last 12 months?
And get it for half price.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so
you have project need.
For project needs, okay.
Yeah, I would say it that way. The other way, Jeff, is they go, we've been wanting to get in that building. If we can use the first year and a half at 50% off, then we do a direct, I'm getting kind of in the weeds here, but you can do a direct lease extension behind that sublease and get all that TI money from the landlord, and then you apply it to the beginning of the sublease.
Yeah.
And I've done that. And that's tricky.
Oh.
You follow?
Yeah. Okay. So I've got 20,000 square feet. So here's the reason I'm kind of asking is, are there scenarios that we can say that if people hear this podcast, they go, oh shit, I need to talk to Griff. That's my scenario. So that's what I'm kind of asking questions in that direction.
If you have too much space, you don't like your building, you have a lot of term left, there are options that can be done. Lease restructuring, subleasing, working with architects to relay out space are the big three.
All right, say those one more time.
Subleasing, lease restructuring, and working with architect and GC to redo your layout.
Okay. So basically TI with the sublease or TI with the space adjustment.
Yeah.
So I was highlighting, hey, so anything less than 2 years is going to be difficult
to sublease
unless you're fishing for a project need. So if you're in an industry, oil and gas maybe has project. Is there an industry that favors?
I'll tell you, there's
needs?
not much project stuff out there.
There's not
anymore. There used to be. So engineering companies would get them from time to time. Now they can all do that remote with AI and ChatGPT, all the other virtual stuff.
Right. Okay. And then the interesting thing, signing a sublease,
and then back ending it with a direct lease,
and then saying, "Hey, the subtenant will say to the landlord, I'm going to have a full term lease once this is done.
I'd like to get a extension of my sublease into a direct lease with you, Mr. Landlord. Give me a 5-year proposal." So the subtenant moves in and takes 18 months of the sublease at half off. And then they get the 5-year direct lease, which is at a negotiated market rate. But that landlord's concession package, tenant improvement allowance, and so forth, those dollars can be used to remodel the sublease at the beginning.
All righty. So jumping around to different subjects, Griff, we were talking is there a minimum or at a certain point, subleasing is probably not a good option because of how much time's on the lease or whatever?
Yeah, good question, and I think that's right. You get under a couple years of term remaining on a lease, and it's difficult to dispose of that space and lease obligation to a subtenant because a subtenant has to spend money and time to move into any space, right? By the time you move into sublease space, and then you start moving your audio video, and you do your new floors, and so forth. Now you've got 18 months, and you got to either move out or you're over a barrel to do an extension. So it can be done, but it's not as likely.
In another conversation, you had mentioned to me that sometimes in the past there was project need subleasing that was driving that, but maybe not as much. So
not as much. It doesn't feel like these days. I mean, if you have less than 2 years, so what can happen in a really big building is if you have space on the market for sublease with less than 2 years, there could be a tenant in the building that goes, gosh, we're just sitting on top of each other. We'd love to have a little relief to get that 5,000, 10,000 feet of space for the next 18 months to help us bridge before we have to deal with our office space and lease. So it's not a terrible idea to put it on at any time. Just, I think the takeaway here is it's less likely to do a traditional sublease when you have less than a couple years of term left.
Okay. All right. Is there like another like metric, like we talked about, you use the term people on top of each other because maybe that company is growing or that tenant's growing and other companies are downsizing. Is there a certain point where you say, you know what, space to person ratio is just way overloaded? I guess that depends on the industry and
depends on the industry, space, and they're the ones that kind of call themselves out, right? Yeah. They're like, we don't have any more room for all these new hires that are coming down the pipe. We all want to see that, right? Because that means they're going to expand, lease more office space, grow. It's a healthy business, right?
Okay.
One thing I'll add on here, Jeff, that I think is important is like, so why restructure your lease early?
Right? Great. Yeah. Thanks.
So what's the benefit of that? Well, you absolutely can see rent reductions, 10, 20%, but I've seen it as much as 40% and more.
Oh, wow.
Now, that means the tenant's downsizing a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? Restructuring the rent rate a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Capturing some tenant improvement allowance that they can put into the space, but they can also use to offset rent. So there's some different levers to pull to achieve that rent rate or rent reduction.
Mm-hmm.
And the key trading chip that the tenant has is extending the term. If a tenant's comfortable extending the term because they know they're going to be in business and they like where they are,
okay,
they can use that, with the right approach, with the right landlord. Usually you can get the attention of these landlords and they'll say, yeah, give me 5 or 7 or 10 more years of term. I can work with you a little bit. It's got to be net more new rent, to be clear. But that absolutely is available. They just don't advertise it.
Is there a fork in the road where you advise, hey, your situation calls for sublease or your situation calls for restructuring, or do you just kind of like, hey, both options are on the table at all times?
Great question. I suggest doing both.
Doing both. Okay.
Yeah, you put the space on the market for sublease. Okay. That's not a big lift. Let's just go fishing, see what we find. Because if you can, as the sub landlord in this case, or the tenant trying to attract a subtenant, capture a prospect that will take your space, your conversation with the landlord is very different. Landlord, you just had a replacement tenant for your obligation or part of it. Now restructuring your lease can work possibly more easily with the landlord because you went out and, hey, here's a tenant that can replace all my footprint or half of it. It's just a better conversation.
Okay.
The main thing is the landlord doesn't want to see rental income go out the door.
Okay. So and we're kind of coming to a close, right? And so understanding the difference that we've highlighted about subleasing or restructuring, some of the complications, some of the timing and stuff like that. Partners in real estate, what are so you'll be representing the tenant or potentially the subtenant and stuff. What are some other services around what you do or your company that can make that a better solution for people in need?
Yeah, great question. So, having strategic relationships with general contractors, with architects, help size up opportunities and show our clients in real numbers how things look if you were to do scenario A, scenario B, scenario C. So that's very helpful. And we work with them because we want them to earn the business when there's a real deal. So some of the lifting they do with us for our client is showing them scenarios under which they can consider. All right. And then another piece to that helps a lot is we have in-house construction management. So when you have construction management as a service line, it's a great bridge for what we do as our tenant rep broker, because they take the ball and work with the flooring contractors. They work with the millwork guys. They work with the architects. They work with the city for permitting. So that's a smooth transition, or can be, and we hope it is, after all the fighting and negotiating on the lease and the structure with the landlord, and it has to be a win-win for the tenant and the landlord. Then there's a lot of heavy lifting that happens, as you know, doing floor installs all over the city.
Right. Excellent. I guess we'll first of all, I'll say thank you. Is there one last thing, anything with prospective tenants that are out there looking for need that you'd like to say? Or
I just think it's interesting, having done this for a while now, that truly any tenant in most any situation, short of having just signed their lease in the last 12 months for a 10-year lease, there's not too much you can do on that, right?
Yeah.
That you just did your deal. But it doesn't hurt for a tenant to evaluate. If they get with the right tenant rep broker, that tenant rep broker should be able to size up the likelihood or the scenarios under which that tenant might restructure or redo or sublease their space, and take some of the guesswork out of it.
Yeah.
So I think it doesn't hurt to evaluate it. And if it's done right, there's no time wasted. And there may be some ways to achieve rent savings.
Awesome. Okay, one other question I think that might be important. What are some of the financial risks for subleasing? Because I know leases in the past are so tough to either get in and get out. Now I've got a subtenant that's underneath that's got to follow the. So talk to me about my financial risk of bringing somebody into my space.
So I'll from the sub landlord or the tenant's position, subleasing to another tenant to take part or all of their space. That's kind of one scenario. The landlord is not letting the tenant off the hook of their lease obligation. The landlord is okay. Usually they have the right to approve or decline, but not to be unreasonably withheld. The ability for the tenant to have a subtenant to help them augment the rent obligation. Okay. So that is still, landlord still has a direct path to the tenant. Now the landlord has another hook into the subtenant of sorts because they're in their building. So there's no risk except for the sub landlord losing the subtenant one day. Right? They just walk out the door.
Okay.
Now the risk in these different parties is to the subtenant, because if the sub landlord, they walk or they go out of business or they file bankruptcy, there's a legal way for them to reject the lease or walk away from the lease. And now the subtenant's flapping around with no contractual right to stay in the space.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I was thinking just as me being the landlord tenant being I'm trying to get somebody to sublease my occupant space. I was looking at
it's the other way.
So the same amount of risk that I have already signed up for as the landlord tenant is there. It's the subtenant that is risking. And at that point, they're already coming in on a deal. So
they're coming in on a deal usually.
Hopefully,
right?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Okay.
They're almost always below market rents on sublease deals. Now, in today's world, there's been situations where landlords are the ones that have financial problems, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you've seen some buildings trade hands.
Yeah.
So it's not, you just never want to lock and load and close your eyes, because as the tenant, you have a landlord that has to perform. And then as a subtenant, now you have two parties that have to perform. You have to have the landlord perform, but you also have to have your sub-landlord perform. Either one of those don't perform, your subtenant that's got that sweetheart financial deal may not have a deal.
Yeah. Griff, you've been awesome as a guest.
Buddy.
Thank you so much. So It's a crazy economic time, and understanding how to restructure your existing lease, sublease your existing lease is, I think, critical. And Griff and his team at Partners is a go-to resource, and we appreciate everybody listening. Watch for more episodes. Tenantimprovement.com, the Lease and Build podcast. Thank you.